Thank you for the opportunity to testify before the subcommittee today. I've been a strong supporter of the flood insurance program ever since it began. I think it's a great idea, and but we also have to recognize it has to be properly administered. In my hometown of Grand Rapids, Michigan, is facing severe negative economic impacts as a result of FEMA's floodplain remapping initiative. I appreciate the opportunity to explain this to the subcommittee, precisely what is happening here. I have a longer written statement that I will submit for the record. Grand Rapids is a city of 200,000 people settled along the Grand River. It is the second largest city in Michigan and the center of a metropolitan area of over 1 million people. The current story of flood mapping in Grand Rapids is one of bad timing and bureaucratic closed-mindedness, as well as disagreements between different federal and state government agencies. The city was first notified about the FEMA floodplain remapping initiative in the fall of 2003. This was right around the same time that the city had just completed a 17-year, $12.4 million project to improve the flood walls and embankments along the Grand River. In other words, a city, urban area with not a lot of money took it upon themselves to develop a major flood wall and embankment project. They raised the flood walls to 1 foot above the 100-foot elevation, which at that time was deemed by the Corps of Engineers as adequate, cost-effective, and context-sensitive. 2 years later, after that major project was finished, which really strained the government's resources, the city's resources, in August 2005, FEMA issued a procedural memo which required that levees be constructed to 3 feet above the 100-year flood elevation in order to be considered during mapping revisions or updates. In other words, the mammoth project the city had done, following guidelines from various government agencies, both state and local, were now 2 feet below the required level. Apparently, the FEMA design standards were in place since 1986, but it was more of a guideline than an enforced rule. And Grand Rapids city officials were told in July 2006 that their flood walls and embankments were not adequate, would not be considered as in FEMA's remapping. Once the appeals are resolved and the new map is finalized and published, it will trigger the flood insurance requirements for those properties located in the newly identified floodplain. According to a draft report from a local engineering firm, the new regulations are estimated to impact over 6,000 parcels in the city of Grand Rapids, with a potential for a total annual insurance premium of somewhere between $6 million and $22 million. This is particularly unwelcome news to a center city and a state facing troubling economic times and high unemployment. Many of the affected properties are in low and moderate income neighborhoods. I strongly encourage this subcommittee to work with FEMA on a more reasonable approach. FEMA should discard its all or nothing policy on levee certification and should take existing flood protection into consideration when revising its maps and calculating flood risk, particularly when a modern city with typical modern city financial problems has taken it upon itself to really improve the protection within the city. I understand that FEMA has a job to do in warning and insuring against flood risk. However, arbitrarily disregarding existing flood protection, ignoring context-sensitive design, and requiring property owners to insure themselves against imaginary flood risk that will likely never be realized has economic impacts on communities and property owners that are inappropriate and unfair. We've heard rough estimates that the new standards will likely provide protection for a 500-year floodplain, which is certainly longer than the age of the city. Finally, I encourage the subcommittee to ensure that FEMA is utilizing the best and most appropriate geologic, hydrologic, and climate data and the flood modeling available. It is my understanding that there is some question about the accuracy and consistency of the modeling used in mapping Kent County and the city of Grand Rapids. The effective implementation of a reasonable flood insurance program depends on accurate science. Let me add one quick note, and that is even if we simply raise the current levees by the 2 feet that are required by FEMA, that would not meet the standards of FEMA because there are a number of river crossings, bridges that would not meet the standard. Reconstructing all the bridges would be a backbreaking monetary task for the city of Grand Rapids. And so I'm asking that you help us develop a better plan that can meet the actual needs of the floodplain and not break the bank for the city of Grand Rapids. I thank you very much for your listening, and I hope we can work this out.